Welcome to the Mockingcast, the podcast of Mockingbird Ministries, an organization that exists to connect the Christian faith with the realities of everyday life. As always and ever, I'm Scott Jones, your host, and we come to you every Friday to discuss, among other things, the content of our weekly wrap-up piece, Another Week Ends, which is sort of like our Christian cosmopolitan's grace-infused guide to the contents of the interweb as we see them for the week. In just a moment, I'll be joined by David Zoll, and sitting in for the second time for Sarah Condon, Leslie Hall, who is from Cincinnati, Ohio, goes to my friend Mandy Smith's church, and is a friend of the show and of Mockingbird. So we're thrilled to have her with us on the cast this week. But before we get to Another Weekends, I had the distinct singular privilege of having a conversation this week that it almost broke the Mockingcast, like Kim Kardashian broke the internet. I mean, this is, it was of epic proportions. I sat down in New York City, in our New York City studio setup at St. George's Church, with Liel Leibowitz, senior writer for Tablet Magazine and co-host of Unorthodox, probably my favorite podcast to listen to. It's the only podcast I listen to every week on the day it comes out. If you are listening to this with young children in the car, there are a couple instances of some explicit language in the conversation. Not many, but a couple. Here on the Mockingcast, which is, I mean, this is a really special moment for the podcast. It's really, I mean, what we deign to call this.
It is the Ecumenical Apocalypse.
The Ecumenical Apocalypse. And Liel Leibowitz, which if you've listened to the cast for any amount of time, you've heard me talk about Unorthodox many times. It's a podcast I continue to find inspiring, funny, properly irreverent, and sometimes you even get professional eaters.
In person.
Yeah.
Which is something that you need to see and smell to believe.
Liel, you've done a lot in your life. In a second, I'm going to get into it. But I think that you sitting and live narrating, I mean, you could have been one of the great sports broadcasters of all time. I mean,
sports, thank you for that. But that would require sports being what I consider sports, which is consuming, how much did he do? 42 matzo balls in 6 minutes?
Or latkes.
Oh, latkes, right. 42 latkes. And see, I've been with that guy a few times. If that was a sport, which is my idea of what the human body was put here to achieve, then yes, I would have been one of the greats. But I get that.
And your descriptions were so like, I mean, this is back to like the brilliant, this is like a Howard Cosell. I mean, you're like, these are not normal latkes. These are the size of an infant's head. Like, I was just like, yeah, wow. I mean, this guy he could have been a big time. He could have like,
you know, when you meet Don Moses Lerman, and you try to train with him in all sorts of professions, because they have different fields in the competitive eating world. They have the matzo balls, the latkes, the dreaded pastrami rye sandwich. I tried once with him at Carnegie Deli to do 5.5 pounds in an hour, and I'm a big guy. I'm a fat Jew. I walked into that establishment thinking, you know, I'm gonna nail this. About 2 pounds later, I was ready to meet my maker. I could not even begin. And Don Lerman, who's middle aged, who's little, he just swallowed and swallowed and swallowed.
That is amazing.
I mean,
and I'm glad you said that you were Jewish, because people were thinking Jainist or maybe Congregationalist New England.
I think if you hear Leibowitz, you really think Congregationalist New England.
Yeah,
we're famous.
Maybe it's flirting with Jainism.
Yeah. My people came on the
because I'd picture you also
whatever the Jewish Mayflower.
I'm sure most people, unless you had said something with would have thought vegan. So I mean, so Liel, you are
my people came on the El Al Mayflower.
Liel, you are one of the hosts of Unorthodox, which again is a great podcast. Our listeners just Google it, Unorthodox podcast. It's amazing.
Thank you. And I am drinking phenomenal rye, Dad's Hat, if we may plug it, in a church in the middle of the day. So I would say my life to-do list is accomplished. I have nothing more to do on this planet. That's it.
Is this the closest you've had to a real conversion? Because you were saying, because you almost went Episcopalian for another guy, and he brought Triscuits and unsweetened iced tea.
I mean, you really, really, really took. No, you take the deck, and pour me another glass and make a little bit more of a direct ask, and I'm ready to negotiate here.
We're in the sacristy. I could consecrate these. I could consecrate these goldfish, pizza flavored goldfish, and the dad's hat, and this could be,
which by the way is the goyishiest snack you could have ever imagined. The pizza flavor, really. I mean, no Jew would ever serve you pizza flavored anything.
Yeah,
it'd be plain. Yeah,
that's why you like the unsweetened iced tea.
You've already shown your stripes. You like your beverages straight up, and your party snacks flavored.
And my goldfish, that's the equivalent of an appletini.
Yes, it is.
So you're a journalist, an author, media critic, and most importantly, are there not enough of them? It's a burgeoning field. You're a video game scholar.
I'm a video game scholar.
You wrote a book about video games.
I wrote a book about video games, and I got a PhD in video games, which 7-year-old me is still very happy about.
And you are a writer, senior writer, right, for Tablet Magazine?
For Tablet Magazine.
Were you a sophomore for a while, and they were giving you swirlies at the office?
They hazed me. Yeah, they sent me down to cover APAC for a year as my. No, I'm very fortunate to be on the on the founding team. My friend Alana Newhouse, who's a miracle in this world, founded the magazine and asked me if I wanted to do it, and because I believe, like you guys, that talking about religion in a way that makes sense in the world and isn't just kind of stern and severe and isn't just trivializing and tries to be cool and popular, but actually tries to have a serious conversation in a way that means something and makes sense in your life. There's nothing that I was happier to do, and I'm so overwhelmed and grateful that it has been going so well.
Yeah, it's a great magazine. I encourage our listeners, go over to Tablet. It's tabletmag.com.
It's tabletmag.com.
All right.
Who else would let me make, about 10 Holocaust jokes a week? It's very few places like that left.
Yeah, I actually told one last week on our podcast. I gave you full credit for the citation, but it was the one about knock knock.
Who's there?
The Holocaust.
The Holocaust too.
I thought you said you'd never forget.
It really never gets old.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I sometimes walk around the house and just say it to my wife. It's pretty great.
Yeah, my kids are 5 and 3. I'm waiting for them to learn about the Holocaust so I could start with them.
You don't hear that, right? You know what? My kids are 5 and 3. I should die for them to hear about the Holocaust.
Hey, darlings. You know what we're going to do next week? We're going to take you to Yad Vashem. We're going to teach you all about Auschwitz. It's going to be great. Look at the zoo. We're going to go to... Yeah, this is getting dark very quickly.
And you also are visiting prof at Columbia, or NYU, rather.
I was.
You were.
I'm on break now.
You're on break now?
From the professorial business.
Because you're visiting. You can't just... some years, you can't spend 2 years on a couch. People can...
That's exactly right. It was a 3-year visit. I enjoyed my visit.
Did your students love you? I mean...
Well, it's hard for me to tell. I'd like to sit here and say, oh, yes, of course. But I'm a professor of video games. My students would love me if I were an inanimate object, because I'm the guy who comes and be like, and today we'll play, Mega Man 10. Yeah, I think it's more the class than me, but I had a blast. And if
but there's certain kids who are like, oh my gosh, Mega Man 10, Mega Man Jump the Shark, it's Mega Man 6.
Please. You old people today and your weird references.
No, you were born in Israel.
I was.
And just so your parents, Iris and Ronnie, I feel like this is fair game because you talked about it on the Father's Day podcast.
I did.
Your father is an Israeli of some acclaim.
But he is. He is the country's famousest bank robber.
He was known as the motorcycle bandit.
That he was.
And didn't they actually do a stamp that commemorated him?
They had a design in the stamp competition. He's a full-time celebrity. He just did a commercial for a motorcycle insurance company. He's a well-known and well-loved figure, which, honestly baffles me to this day because I don't understand this sort of reverence. He is a sort of a Robin Hood figure, except for he never gave to the poor. He just stole from the rich. He's he grew up in this very wealthy family, and when he was about the age I am at now, about 36, 37, his own father called him in and said, "Well, it's kind of time you got a job. You have a family now. You may want to consider a career in something." And my father, who's always believed the edict about do what you love, was like, "Well, I could really only think about one thing I would absolutely love doing." Which was robbing banks, which fits his sort of personality, which fits the kind of, Steve McQueen, Rolex wearing, motorcycle driving, gun toting, guyhood ethos of his life. And turns out he was really good at it. He robbed 21 banks over a year and a half, led this kind of very weird double life. But did amazing things. He would understand, for example, that the last place anyone would ever look for a bank robber is the bank. So he would run out of the bank having just robbed it, and turn the corner, take off his helmet, and very calmly walk right back into the bank. And then the police would arrive shortly thereafter and said, everyone has to leave. And he would sort of look, really sadly at the officer and said, man, I really just need to make this quick deposit. Is it okay? And the officer's like, yeah, but quickly, this is now a crime scene. And he would deposit the money back in the bank. And this is before computers. So then the money he just robbed was virtually untraceable back in the same circulation system of the bank. It's kind of genius.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is Thomas Crown Affair stuff.
Yeah. Only with more guns.
Is the most painful part of that, like you mentioned, the double life thing, the fact that there's this thing going on that's and for ignoble things. I mean, if you're double life in the CIA, your kid finds out about it, that could be, but for the kind of adrenaline, ignoble kind of thing, was that the most painful part of it?
Well, if we're being serious, which is sometimes hard to do when talking about what is basically some B-grade Hollywood movie, right?
It is literally absurd, in Latin, without meaning. I mean, it's but in one sense at least.
I think the most sad thing about it, for me at least, is knowing that he had no other vehicle, emotionally and spiritually, to deal with what he was feeling, because he clearly didn't just hop into this because it was just all fun and games. He clearly got to it because he felt a whole host of feelings, including resentment of his own father, including a tremendous pressure to succeed in his own right, including some sort of very warped understanding of what masculinity is. And he made this choice, which was really, in many non-trivial senses, it was a completely reasonable, straightforward choice for him, because his world was his mental world was so limited that he couldn't even, I reckon he's not easy talking about that kind of stuff. So we never really sat down and had a proper conversation, but I don't really think that he got that this was something he could have actually have avoided, if that makes sense. And I wish he got that. I wish he had a different avenue. I wish he had some other place to turn to in his life that would have made the pressures that he must have felt go away.
Is this why you became a writer and a communicator? I mean, on some level,
I assume that had a lot to do with it. Although my infatuation started before he was arrested, it was always apparent to me that if one really wanted to communicate, one wrote a book about it. Because I think there's a certain class of kind of outsidery weirdos that are never really on the inside, even if they're born with all the right privileges, just sort of end up, you're the kid at school sitting there looking at your friends being like, I'm observing this. I'm not really here. I'm just watching. But having this kind of jolt certainly pushed me along the path. I would say, if anything, this is probably one major reason why I seriously became interested in theology, because when you're 13 and your life is done fucked beyond belief, then you start asking really, really tough questions, and you expect answers, and some of the answers, or at least some of the avenues of inquiry, lead you to this moment of saying, well then I'm going to go a bit wider here. I'm going to start inquiring what is there out there that isn't me, or larger than me, or more meaningful than me. And then you start getting into really interesting stuff.
Did you grow up observant in Israel? I mean, what was your religious life like before that?
So my great-great-grandfather was this legendary rabbi who was the head of the ultra-Orthodox community of Jerusalem. You know, I'm talking early 1900s here.
Please tell me in the evening he went out and killed werewolves or something.
In the evenings he did blow and danced to disco.
Just like this legendary rabbi in the 19th century. I'm just picturing these and he killed the werewolves.
He actually created a monster and reanimated it as it took its. He invented the golem. He was very, very hardcore. He believed firmly that Zionism was a horrible, horrible idea. He believed firmly that the only way for the Jewish state to come about is through an act of God and the Messiah. And he's sitting there in Jerusalem, and he's seeing all these secular, heathens basically drinking and eating pork and having sex with one another. And it pained him because he really believed that this was Jews. I mean, the first pioneers who settled modern day Israel. And he believes this is a complete abomination of the real, teachings of the Torah. So he then makes common cause with the Jordanians. And he writes to the Jordanian king and he says, hey, those Jews, those pioneers from Russia, those Zionists, those guys who are talking about a state, no, those guys are complete heathens. Those are not real Jews. We're real Jews. How about you come over, take over Jerusalem, and then you become the boss and we'll be faithful to you. So the Haganah, which is the pre-state of Israel underground military group, is so miffed by this that they decide to assassinate him. But you can't assassinate him because he's like this big rabbi and spiritual leader of many people. So they assassinate his second in command, who was this closeted gay Catholic-born convert to Judaism named Jacob Dahan. Very interested in guy, poet, ended up living with.
Do you feel like when you get a guy like that? I mean, that's like a dream convert for religion. I mean, that's amazing.
Yep.
That needs, in the next version of the Hanukkah song, somewhere that guy needs to be
closet gay Palestinian boy lover. Jacob Dahan is a Jew. They shot him. They waited for him to leave synagogue one Friday night, and then they just tapped him on the shoulder. He turned around, 3 bullets to the chest, and he fell dead. And that was a warning to great-great-grandpa. Stop talking to Jordanians. So my family really has always had a way of settling its affairs in the most kind of violent, inadequate way imaginable.
Do you think and you're getting at that age, like you said, your dad was like, do you feel like you're going to become like a vigilante now or something to kind of write the colorful cycle?
I really think that I try to do that. This is the lamest, absolute, most kind of just trying to get out of it answer. I think I kind of do this in my writing because my writing often it's not angry, but it's sort of, it shouts. It tries to make a point in a way that's not, polite or intellectual. Here's the thing. Like, I don't feel like an intellectual at all. Maybe it's again the religious thing because I feel faith. I feel moved. I want change. I don't want to opine on something or analyze something. I want to change shit. And that's a totally different emotional landscape.
See, you were saying that because I was asking if you were observant. So like you got the great grandfather, but like as you're growing up, I mean, are you Shabbat comes around? Are you like at services or
Shabbat will come around. You'll watch TV, you'll drive, but you will keep 6 hours between milk and meat. You will of course only eat kosher. You will, of course, go to synagogue in the frequency when it is appropriate to go to synagogue.
How much, as a kid, how much was that for you?
It was, not weekly, but about, regular enough to know what's what and to know what the prayers are like and how definitely all the holidays and definitely say once, twice a month of good, solid presence.
Well, a lot of Episcopalians would say that's indecent, twice a month. That's good. If on certain mainline Protestant scales, you'd be a religious enthusiast, and that's not a good phrase. Even that.
Who is this zealot? What visits the shoal twice a month?
Duo's going to listen to this and say, no, I retract my letter of offer for Episcopalianism. That's just too much religion. It's indecent.
See, but here's the thing that really always interested me. I looked at my mother and my grandmother, who were hardcore. My grandmother on Yom Kippur, which is, the Day of Atonement, the big kind of awesome holiday, literally, she would tear sheets of toilet paper in advance. I was like, Grandma, what are you doing? It's like, God will be angry if thou shalt not tear the toilet paper. I was like, look, I know God said don't eat. I'm down with that. I know the turning off of the light and on, it's fine. But really, the toilet paper, like, God knows that we all poop, right? It's pretty much in the daily prayers.
Not Kim Jong-il.
Right.
Kim Jong-il doesn't. That's right. That's
Kim Jong-un. We're not North Korean despots. And so I always had the kind of weird feelings that they were God-fearing people, but not necessarily believing people. And so I sort of rebelled against this my entire sort of teenage years. I was like, you guys, like, I've never heard any real, like, moving testament of faith from you. I've only always heard, like, thou shalt not, or else someone will be angry. And then when I kind of started making my own path, which is probably around, 16, 17, and started seriously studying, I was like, wow, there's an entirely different realm there. And this is why kind of I think if there's any message that I really care about and try to, if I may, evangelize for, it's this.
That you say that like when people come on Orthodox and say, I want to use a little Yiddish verklempt. If I can talk,
if I can talk Christian now,
evangelize.
If I may evangelize, he said, holding the whiskey in the middle of the day. I want you to do something. I want you to do anything at all. I don't really care what it is. You want to read something? Fine. You want to observe something? Fine. You want to pray? That's great. Just get in there. Just understand that this is something that you need to grapple with, to reckon with. And that, sadly hasn't really always been the message, that we American Jews send, or Israeli Jews for that matter, send out to the world. I think that's kind of what I believe.
It's funny that you say that, because as you were talking just now, I was thinking about something you wrote recently about Preacher. And you said, this is great. I'm going to quote you at length, which, I mean, who wouldn't? I would love to be quoted to me at length.
Well, please. Yeah. Plus I won't even, I'm just enough whiskey into this conversation to not even know that I even wrote whatever it is.
That's okay. Then I'm quoting
quote whatever you
Maimonides, except you didn't watch the show, but you say Seth Rogen wrestled with this theme in his excellent 2015 movie, and you're talking like religion being more than just like, kind of punctiliar observance or something. In his excellent 2015 movie, The Night Before, a meditation on loss and guilt and communion masquerading as a gross out buddy comedy, and he's doing it again in Preacher, a theological track underscoring its weighty questions with a liberal dose of ass kicking, which really is what religion ought to do. Custer is the rabbi we all wish we had, and not only because he's a supreme being who is also ridiculously good looking and really handy with a gun. He's the preacher who understands that it's not enough to be told what to do, that you have to feel it in your heart, and that to feel it in your heart, you need to be surrounded by people who love you and accept you, even if you've done very regrettable things. He's the man of God who knows that it's not enough to follow halacha or the law. You also need to follow agada, the essence of our spiritual thriving, the reason we want to believe. Few of us are blessed with such a shepherd and shul, but all of us ought to be grateful we can find these sparks of the divine in Preacher.
Amen.
You get to
Thank you, Seth Rogen.
This is what's great on the show. You get to amen yourself. It's a nice thing. You're in a sacre stream, and this is the ecumenical apocalypse.
There are two crosses here that I nod at as I say, I'm fine.
If this turns into the strain, and there's, vampires out there.
Oh, we're surviving.
We can we'll be fine here.
People in the world.
We'll be fine.
We have our pizza flavored snacks and our whiskey. We go forever. Yeah, but I mean, don't you feel it? Feeling that so much of religioning, it's sort of like, come here, do this, and you're like, no,
this is Mockingbird's raison d'être.
I know.
I once heard Paul Zoll, who's our founder's father, who's a wonderful man and a person I consider a real mentor and friend in faith. But I heard him give an explanation of the Reformation once. He's an old Episcopal rector. He's, at the time, he's, He's like nearing retirement, and he's got like a cassock and clergy tabs, and he's giving this adult ed talk. And he says, the Reformation was founded because there were some guys, and there were guys, young guys, who felt like they couldn't be themselves. The religious cultural establishment had an external constraint, and freedom is when, it's the Augustine prayer: God, command what you will, but give me the grace to will what you command. Because when I will the good, when there's not a tension between is and ought, is when we feel free. This is Jeremiah, right, saying that there'll come a new covenant where the Torah will be written in your hearts. So you won't need you won't need this exterior thing, and that's where real freedom comes, when it's spontaneous, when you don't when feeling for the good and the true and the beautiful isn't slavish. And so I think that's
this is so. I like this so much, and this is something that I'm still grappling with. I'm still learning. And here's one example. I sat with my friend Menachem, who's kind of my Sherpa into the say more rocky terrains of faith. Menachem's religious, and he's asking me some question about whether or not I say the blessing over food. And I say to him, okay, look, I don't want to be rude, but I do like the bacon. I eat the bacon more often than I can begin to tell you. Sometimes I eat the bacon 3 times a day. Those are good days. Those are also weekdays, because I really like the bacon, and I'm not going to sit there and say the bracha when I eat this thing. And he sort of gets pensive for a second. He looks like a yeshivish Mike Tyson, if you could imagine that. Imagine a white religious Jewish Mike Tyson who spent his life studying Torah.
If there is an apocalypse, can we call him to get over here before the? Oh
no, he will be here.
Yeah, because that would round out a trio.
That would be the one.
We'd be the unholy trinity. Yeah.
And he says something like, "Look, when you eat the bacon, right? You do it with intent." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" So, well, you don't just shove it down your mouth. You do it with a certain kind of contemplation of the enjoyment that you get from the sting, right? You do it with a mindfulness towards what it is that you eat and what it is that you do when you eat what you eat. And I say yes to all these things. So, well, just go ahead and say the blessing. That's 1,000 times more important than whether or not you have passed or transgressed against some law, even though, mind you, pretty major law. No minor stuff. But it's really the feeling of, the Torah in your heart, and the idea that you actually grapple with it, you actually think about it, that makes you ready. Whether or not you're perfect, you're not. You guys are way better at parsing out imperfections than we are, right? Because you have grace, and that's an amazing, beautiful thing that we don't have. But the point is there, and I like it.
But when you say you don't have it, though, I mean, I feel like that's my favorite wedding sermon. I have one. I have several I preach, but I shouldn't say this, because to the couples that might be listening to this, where I preach the same one. But there you go. I'm screwed, because I'm also a pastor in my day job. I'm actually a practicing pastor. It's Genesis 29, right? Because Jacob, marries. His betrothed is Rachel, and Laban's like, oh, it's going to be fine. It's going to okay. Just come on, it'll be okay. Okay, work a few. It's great. And then he wakes up, and it's Leah. And the people first ever think, how could this happen? I'm like, well, lots of booze, like most wedding receptions, without electricity, and a veiled kind of thing. I mean, think Burke-ish, like you're veiled. You could wake up with anybody.
Like you've never fucked your wife's sister at your wedding.
Exactly. Who hasn't done that?
Who hasn't?
But, for
the record, honey, I never did.
Me neither. But he's patient and keeps Leah, who the Hebrew's weird. It could be like who had beautiful eyes, weak eyes, something. I mean, the Hebrew is really ambiguous. Mm-hmm. But then he works, I think another week for Rachel, but then he has to stay, he's got 2 wives, but what's interesting is my sermon is usually, this is every marriage, because at some point you wake up and you go, this isn't who I married. I married the guy that held the door, or the gal that used to put Victoria's Secret lingerie and thigh highs on for her date.
I love that.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Virtually all of Israel's big prophets, priests, and kings come from Leah's womb, not Rachel's. They come from the shadow side. So That's an incredibly gracious story, and also, if we want to just Christian, go the Empire Strikes Back or whatever. I don't know. That sounds silly, but like Jesus comes from the womb of Leah, not Rachel, and so sometimes, like I think that whole story, the whole story of the building of Israel's, offices of redemption are ones in which grace was the doorway.
I absolutely love that.
Well, there you go.
I'm gonna. If anyone
invite me to show, I'll give that on a Shabbat. I don't work hardly any Saturdays. You know what they don't tell you?
You're free Friday nights.
You know what they don't tell you in seminary though? They should just have to say, think about this. You're gonna work a hell of a lot of Sundays.
Yeah. I just want to get back. I absolutely love everything you said. What I meant about grace is sort of like. So I'm obsessed with Augustine. I wanted to name my boy Augustine, and my wife was like, "No, that's just too weird."
Well, the kid would conquer the Augustine Leibowitz.
Like,
here he is.
yeah.
Like, well, he cured cancer. He cured cancer at like 28. He wrote some commentaries on Torah, like Albert Schweitzer. He got bored with that. He moved back.
And now he's in a ska band. But this concept really of
you like ska too, don't you?
Yeah.
I love the horns. I love the horns.
Yeah, I do. It's just too good. Too happy to resist. But if we were having a theological draft, which maybe we should, and we traded things, ideas for one another, I would trade a bunch of what we do for this one idea. The notion that, you guys received this ultimate gift, the notion that it frees you from every, this is the whole like Pelagian controversy thing about which I think more than a Jew should, but like the note that you're not just, it's every man for himself. The notion that there is a vision of perfection that forgives you, and releases you in advance from being perfect. That's mind blowing to me. I love that. With us, it's much more, hey, just work at it. Be your best. It'll be fine. It's a kind of much more sort of severe, earthly type of vision that I struggle with.
Yeah, I don't think that is. I think that's what every tradition. Karl Barth says that like all religion is unbelief, including and especially Christian religion, because you like it. I feel like religiosity is what we do. It's Tower of Babel stuff, right? Let's make a name for ourselves. Let's it's what we do in the absence of revelation. Like, sometimes God graces us with, revealing himself in religious observance, but that's something you kind of can't control. It's why you open a passage of Torah or the New Testament, and one day it blows you away, and the next day it's not a talisman or a magical mantra you can, I guess, like rub and like kind of get.
That's exactly right. This is why, one of the most kind of beautiful. I think it was definitely Chesterton, G.K. Chesterton. I think it was in the Great Jesus book, in the Everlasting Man, in which he basically says, you want doubt? Speak to someone who's faithful. Speak to someone who really takes this seriously, because it doesn't come out of, as you said, it doesn't come out of revelation. If you had revelation, it would be easy. It comes out of struggling. It comes out of wrestling. Do you want to really know the extent of a person who feels that doubt every day? Talk to a religious person. And this is what drives me absolutely crazy when I have these conversations with so many of my colleagues who I love and respect, who are sort of committed atheists and or agnostics, who kind of look at me askance and be like, "Well, you're a serious person. How could you believe any of this nonsense? What is it that you think we do? What is it that you imagine we are about? Do you think we read the book and be like, oh yeah, no, that's not problematic at all that, Moses just raised his arm and the sea, tore itself in half. Well, we're cool with that. Do you think we don't ask questions? You think we don't grapple and struggle with meanings? Like, really? That's just inconceivable to me. This is the most unpopular view in all of, this is the one thing that as a Jew, when you say, people are like, how dare he? That is just so intolerant. I don't think you could be a real Jew without believing in God. I'm sorry. I know there are a lot of people who buy this sort of like, but we're cultural Jews, our mother's vagina was Jewish, so we're Jewish too, and we love Seinfeld and we eat a lot of bagels. That's great for you, hang out. That's cool. I'm not telling you not to, but it's a religion that we're doing here. We have belief, we have faith, we take it really seriously. It's a conversation I have with Mark about every week. We still haven't resolved it. I suspect we never will.
Well, I would come to that conversation.
Would you be the referee?
I would totally. I would, if I could be your Gentile of the week. I would be
unfair intervention.
I would like. I don't even have a bucket list. I might create it for that.
Okay, we're done. You are our Gentile of the week.
We'll just. Do you have that kind of authority? You really have that kind of authority?
I have that kind of authority vested in me.
I think one of the Achilles heels of Christianity sometimes is something we can learn from Judaism. You guys joked about this when you asked Mark in an episode if he believed in God. And he was kind of like, maybe, sometimes, I don't know. But then you guys joked about, for an evangelical, what is it? It's like, if you say, I'm not sure I believe, and then get hit by a bus, like, is it 5-second rule? Like what? But so I feel like on one level, what you're saying is, in the current state of Judaism, believing and belonging are too far apart. Like they're almost disconnected. Like it doesn't matter what you believe, you belong. You're kind of you. I feel like in certain expressions of Christianity, believing and belonging are too closely connected in the sense of like, I probably would be a true believer if in any tradition, like, and that's not to denote the work of the Spirit in my own coming to faith, but like that's like 8 to 10% of people psychologically, and maybe the other 8 to 10% on the other extreme are people that they'd be in the tradition, but minimalist, whatever. And then most people are the 80% where some seasons it's more faith and fear and doubt. Other times it's more anxiety, fear, doubt. Like, and I feel like what especially more quote unquote conservative forms of Christianity, I'm not talking about their politics. I'm talking about like, hey, how much of the Apostles' Creed do you believe? And the folks that tend to believe most or all of it tend to pitch the whole thing for the temperament of the 8% that could sign off on everything. And I think in Judaism, at its best, and you're saying maybe it's in an excess right now, but at some of its best, it allows that you can have seasons where you're full of doubt and anxiety and even frustration with all things theological, and yet you could still be part of the tradition.
Well, yeah. Well, okay. Let's differentiate. I'm a Jew. It's my birthright to tell a story. I'm going to tell my favorite Jew story ever. So there are two rabbis, and they're sitting and they're arguing about this paragraph from the Torah. What does it mean? And one rabbi says, if I'm right, let this tree over here get up and start dancing. And as soon as he finishes saying it, the tree gets up and starts dancing. And the second rabbi says, so? That's not proof of anything. Doesn't mean you're right. It's just a dancing tree. And the first rabbi says, okay, if my interpretation of this Torah verse is correct, see this well over there? Let this well gush forth with colorful water. And as soon as he's done talking, the well just explodes with like this rainbow colored water, stream. And the second rabbi says, so? That's not proof of anything. It's just a well. And the first rabbi, frustrated, says, okay, if my interpretation of this verse in the Torah is right, let God himself come down from heaven and say so. And God appears. He says, yes, no, your interpretation is correct, my son. And the second rabbi looks at him and says, excuse me, your word may mean something in heaven, but this is earth. This is for us to decide who's right. And then the story ends that a week later, God met the prophet Elijah and said, delightfully with a big smile, I've met my children and they have bested me. This is kind of what I love most about this faith. There really is a feeling. I mean, not even the Almighty has any sort of real particular preference in what we're saying. But the thing that I was getting at with this affiliation thing, I feel most of the time when you meet someone and he tells you, hey, I'm a Christian, you know exactly where you don't know exactly where that person stands. But you know that there's a commitment.
If they
right?
self-identify,
that's what I'm saying. I do think that it's nice to have the courage to go out there and say, hey, look, it's faith. We're not going cut it down and scrub it off so that it looks really, really nice and it's not offensive in a cocktail party. There are things we believe in, and I think with Jews, where you get this really most of the time is chosenness. This is the closest we have to the whole Jesus thing,
which you've written a book on.
I have, and I'm obsessed.
Co-authored with
Todd Gitlin, who doesn't believe in this concept. But to me, if you don't, what's the point of the whole religion?
Yeah,
that's kind of the basis of it. It's kind of at the crux of the entire thing. If you could be uncomfortable with it, as the people who heard it from God were uncomfortable with it. God had to reveal himself to Abraham 5 freaking times just to convince one man that he was actually chosen. It's a difficult concept. I know, I get it. Grapple with it. But don't say like, oh, no, we're all the same. Well, if that's the case, then why are you here? For what? Then there's so many other affiliations that are so freaking better.
It's interesting you say that, because I think so. First, I heard Tim Keller, who's a great one of the best. I was going to say Protestant preachers, but Christian preachers week to week. Like, if you can stand a 35-minute sermon, which many evangelicals can. He's unbelievable. But he said, when a sermon once, he said, chosen doesn't mean choice. Mm-hmm. We're not the choice cut of meat. We're just chosen.
Think about how strange the story is, right? So here's 600,000 unwashed nomads, right? And they're standing at the foothills of the mount. This is the pinnacle of the biblical drama, right? This is the moment we've all been waiting for. This is like the big reveal in the end of Act 2 of the movie. This is it. This is the money shot. And God comes out, and here's what he says. You will be unto me, kingdom of priests, a holy nation. Good night, everyone. This is in a book that saw it fit to dedicate hundreds of pages to what the freaking you should do if your ox gores another man's ox, right? There was an answer for that, and all you tell us about chosenness is the kingdom of peace, holy nation. You imagine those guys standing at the foothill of a mount saying, okay, a couple of questions out. First of all, why us? Second of all, what were we chosen for? Third of all, are kids automatically chosen after us? Can you get unchosen? What are the freaking footprints? A fine print of this thing, right? This is a really big contract you're getting us to sign. What do you mean? That's the normal human reaction. That's how Abraham reacted. That's how every sane person in the history of humankind would have reacted. And this book that is so dense with a lot of other really minutia doesn't say. And it leads you with this incredible revelation, which is to have been chosen means spending the rest of eternity wondering what it means to have been chosen. It means to constantly live in self-doubt and self-questioning. It means to constantly come up with your own answers to what this means. And this is where I do this brings us back to grace. This is where I do really envy Christianity, because there's, to me, something truly magnificent about having that example, right? Of looking at that gift you were given at the Savior, and saying that, do that, which you'll never be able to do. Aspire to that. Come as close as you can to that. Walk in His light. It's darker where we are. It's grimmer where we are. It's more struggle where we are, which explains, I think, how we've kind of rolled down the centuries with a very particular outlook. I've come to like it a great deal and embrace it and respect it, and I think in some ways really kind of try to embody it. But I do see the alternative as quite appealing. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, no, it does. And I think a lot of people I know that are firmly rooted in the Christian tradition, and sometimes rooted in the more theologically robust end of it, don't understand grace. I mean, because I think this is just a human thing.
Right. But here's the thing. I don't feel 100%. I'll put it like this. When I say, I thank you, and this is, I'm being super personal here. This is the first time I've ever shared it with anyone.
Right here. My exclusive. Mockingbird exclusive. Now, if we were Fox News, we'd cut away right now because they do good television. We'll be back.
It either took this church or this rye whiskey to get me to say it, but I say, thank you, Father, for your grace, which is ironic because the whole grace obsession again. But the truth is, I don't really feel he's listening. And I say this not as a kind of scorn trial. I say this having been raised so thoroughly within Jewish theological tradition, not to expect that he would be, to expect that my relationship is always with the ultimate unknowable, always with the ultimate all-knowing, always with the ultimate unpresent. And there's always something that strikes me about this notion of grace that says, well, you're one step closer, There's one less obstacle in your way. There's a man. There's a God. There's something that you could look at and feel, and there's the act of sacrifice, right? Which makes it personal. I know it's a very kind of thwarted interpretation of what grace is about, but it always struck me as like, wow. Because when I say, thank you, Father, for your grace, I say believing with all my heart and might and every fiber of my being that he's there, but also believing just as equally that by design, he's not listening.
When you've talked about Christianity on the podcast, I thought, man, this guy gets the thing. And he gets it from a place that it's probably not the easiest to get it.
I don't think you could pay me a higher compliment, because this is something that I think about a lot. This is something that's fundamental, because I think when you really start taking faith seriously, then you start having these, you start doing this field survey of what's out there. And I have this, not just respect, but I actually have a real love for it, as deeply rooted as I am in my faith and my tradition. When you see something that is so glorious, you could be like, man, I envy that a little bit. And I think that's actually a really good basis for a real ecumenical relationship. It shouldn't just be like, well, I respect your differences, but am I glad that I don't have to go through this? It should be like, wow, I can imagine that, right? It's the imagination part. It's just like, I could totally see myself as that.
Have you ever preached a sermon?
I've spoken in shuls, but I take the preaching duties very seriously. I can't say that I have. I've spoken about Leonard Cohen in shul, and he is.
Which you have a book for our listeners,
which I do, and I consider him to be one of the greatest teachers, and my rabbi of this era. He's a popular singer songwriter. For those of you not familiar, he's the guy who wrote the song Hallelujah, which tells you everything you need to know, and just this line that he has that is, I think, sort of basically the pinnacle of wisdom as far as I'm concerned. That says, ring the bells that still could ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
Well, you have to go. You told me we're past your time.
I don't want to.
Well, I
want to stay here.
You can. We could talk for a few more minutes.
Sanctuary.
It's
hold on to the altar.
I'm going to just say that Leo and I might talk for a few more minutes, but this is where and you may or may not get this on Give and Take, where the uncut interviews go, like Krista Tippett's. But Leo, thank you. I mean, this has been really great. And would you come back soon? Maybe even
come back every week. This has been amazing.
I like that.
Whatever you want.
Can you? That's your lips to God's ears, and also just if you could tell your Jewish friends. There's a little group of people.
Attention, Jews.
Attention, Jews.
The Christians on Mockingbird are calling you.
These are Christians.
Obey.
We're not into obey. No, that would make we'd be so nervous about that. We'd be so nervous.
I think we should have the Ecumenical Apocalypse should actually be a podcast. The more I think about it.
We could do this.
It's something that we do.
It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. And I feel fine. slash and burn, return.
All right, here we are once again. It's Friday. It's that time. It's Mockingcast time, and we've got a little bit of a different setup today. Actually, I have live in studio the animating force of the zeitgeist here in the Langhorn nest of Mockingbird world. David Zoll, what's going on, DZ?
Well, do you think I'm kind of, for once, animating the studio?
You are. It's like, I feel like if it was any more animated, I would become Bugs Bunny. I would just, or maybe Woody Woodpecker.
Well, someone's got to animate things, and, you know, sometimes that person is me.
And DZ, let me say, first off, the podcast did not, the time-space continuum did not rip with the ecumenical apocalypse of me and Liel. But like Liel, you are disappearing, bro.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, yeah, June reduction. That's what I call it, my June reduction every year.
You sound like a salad dressing.
Yeah.
And sitting in for Sarah Condon, Leslie Hall, back once again as our guest host from Ohio.
Thanks for having me back, Scott.
Anytime. Thanks for being willing to do this. Getting up early to just talk with us about things in the world as we see them. It's a gracious thing for you to do for us.
Things. Yeah, it's no big deal. It sounds the best way to spend my day at 7 a.m. in the morning.
Well, you're a barista too, right? So you're used to probably some early shifts.
Oh yeah, I would have done a lot of things by now if I was working. There would have been a lot of espresso shots and a lot of getting the shop set up.
Well, we're glad that you're helping to set up our little shop and connecting with our listeners and friends out there. So first off, let's talk social media, David. This comes to us, Hat Tip New Yorker.
Yeah, the New Yorker put up pretty funny one of their shouts and murmurs. It's called like an open letter from your horrible Facebook friends. Sort of the writer compiled sort of all of the worst tendencies that basically all the Facebook friends that you would want to hide, both the annoying ones, the political ones, the sort of self-aggrandizing ones. My favorite little paragraph is, they're writing to you sort of to talk to you about what you need to really take them seriously, and how it's kind of this sincere letter. What we're trying to say is that we are more than what we post on Facebook with seemingly zero understanding of grammar, boundaries, or tone. We have no idea what bitcoins are. We hate that they don't play real music on the radio anymore, and we want to read local news stories about dogs. Is that so awful? So meet us halfway. You never accepted our invitations to play Candy Crush. You never took the personality quizzes we shared on your wall, and you never participated in the Ice Bucket Challenge. It raised a lot of money and, more important, awareness. Look, sorry, we don't want to sound aggressive. We're just a little grumpy because of all the CrossFit we've been doing.
Did you guys do the Ice Bucket Challenge?
I did not, no.
I did
Neither
not.
did I was invited and said, no, thank you.
Yeah, well, I have nothing against the Ice Bucket Challenge. I just didn't do it.
I was afraid I'd have a heart attack.
Wow, that's really intense.
I mean, I don't know. It could, like, your body's not meant to just like switch all that. It's so extreme. That and CrossFit, everything is so like meta and epic and like, like I just like, how about the lukewarm bucket challenge?
The tepid water challenge. Yeah, it's just like they drizzle some sort of room temperature water on top of your head. That's all of a sudden you're baptized.
I don't like Candy Crush or Farmville. I don't like the Ice Bucket, and I don't like CrossFit. Leslie, where are you on all those things?
Probably the same. I try to think of any annoying Facebook tendency that I have. I share too many articles about music that probably no one cares about. That probably gets annoying, but
about Mockingbird articles, right?
I share Mockingbird articles, and that's it.
That's like when they asked the presidential candidates in 2008, like, what's their Democratic candidates, what's their weekness? And like Obama went first. He said, well, I have really bad organizational skills. And like my staff says, like, don't put paper in his hand right until the moment I'm going on the floor. And John Edwards is like, I just am obsessive on my tireless commitment to the poor. And Hillary Clinton's like, it's just my obsessive work ethic for the country. And Obama later is like, I thought I should have said, like, I love walking ladies across the street, old ladies. And, sometimes I get late to the Senate floor. I sometimes post really smart music articles that people read because they're cultural Philistines and they're on Farmville.
Oh, man, I'm a hipster barista. What can I say? I'll just live into my identity.
So do you know that CrossFit also, by the way, causes rhabdomyosis, which no one should get, except like one in a 10,000 Navy SEALs in training or a freak Olympic athlete, it's actually a condition where your muscles get so fatigued that they break, and the lactic acid, something happens, and they don't heal quite right because the muscle tissue doesn't scar the correct way. So there's these little cartoon pictures, Robdo the clown, where it's like a clown, and it causes kidney problems, right? So he's in a kidney dialysis thing, and he's a clown that's like jacked up, and Robdo the clown. And this is a normal thing in CrossFit.
Huh.
That's intense.
Yeah. You've entered a slightly extremist world when that's the that's the caution. This is kind of funny because we talked about CrossFit. I talked about it in California a couple weeks ago, and then there's another article about the theology of CrossFit. And maybe CrossFit's getting too raw of a deal here. I just see it as it's helpful in terms of looking at the popular religiosity, as well as the way that we seek out those things, Americans especially, that are the closest approximation of like the most miserable forms of manual labor, because our freedom is so oppressive to us.
It's like Opus Dei, like in Da Vinci Code with the self-flagellation stuff. It's like a form of medieval spirituality, man. You're just like, By the way, can I just say, my wife and I, a couple years ago, we were sitting in a bar and we were talking about personality tests. And this is when there were more of them. It was just when they were coming on, like, which soprano character are you? Which Lion King character are you? Like, which form of mite or insect are you? Like, if you were a bacterial mutation, which would you be? So I was like, what if we had one, like we created one, like, which STD are you? And so I posted as if I just took it and without a link because it didn't exist. But I said, which STD are you? I got chlamydia, easy to catch and treat, but devastating when ignored.
That's about right.
That's me. Yeah. I'm needy. I need attention. But it's very interesting, right? Because Miroslav Volf, who will be on our show next week, actually interviewed him this week in New Haven, which is a lovely town. He says that the first thing we do, like in our own moments of in our own moments of judgments, we exclude ourselves from the table of sinners and remove the other from the fellowship of humanity. And so we've all just done that right now with all the other people that
all those other Facebook bores,
all the people that are like judgmental or that we that are annoying, unlike us. Yeah. I'm annoying as everybody else is, I'm sure. Next up, moving on, we have a couple pieces. One comes to us, where's the first one? Celebrity, David.
That one's also from the New Yorker, and really interesting thing about how celebrities have kind of come to be known for their organizational skills and work ethic, as well as sort of whatever it is they're talented at. And this especially when it comes to female celebrities, that it starts as a riff on Kim Kardashian, who's not only this sort of exhibitionistic, famous for being famous person, but on the show, I guess she does talk a lot about what she needs to get done, that she's very, very hardworking and extremely, conscientious of that sort of thing. But then he brings in Amy Schumer, and then talks about Mindy Kaling and Tina Fey, who he sees as responsible for, this is Nathan Heller writing, for putting career back near the center of their sitcoms. It's like, as opposed to Seinfeld or Friends or Frasier, where no one was ever working, everything took place.
George got fired a lot.
Yes, that is true. And
you slept with the cleaning. Is that sort of thing frowned upon here? Because my old office, that went on all the time.
Was that wrong? Well, this is pretty interesting because he sees it as, indicative of the larger swing toward worshiping productivity. And he says celebrities are regularly cast as superhuman versions of normal people, and upper middle class normal is currently piled high with work. And then female celebrity for years was rooted in luxury and beauty culture. Slowly it is moving toward a work and achievement culture. And such re-narrativization requires active reinforcement in the public eye. So yet another kind of example of the cult of productivity taking over. There's certain ways in which these are great strides, but then you're dealing with a new form of, worship, which is that of we worship the career.
Yeah, it is like, I never thought of Amy Schumer. I guess her show though, is very career oriented, right?
Well, I think she's also like, you're very aware of how hard she's working, that she's doing everything, and this is somehow applies more to, I think, because female celebrity culture was more based in beauty and things like this. But, this swing towards productivity and lionizing the career, I mean, look at us here at 6 a.m. Recording a podcast. I mean, we are not exempt. But this article I thought, hits the nail on the head.
By the way, Amy Schumer's HBO special is hilarious. And she says, I'm known as a sex comic because I talk about sexuality. But meanwhile, if a guy could just whip his genitals out on the stage and all the critics go, oh, he's so smart. He's so crafty. So there's a little bit of sexism probably in comedy. Let's see, like you're a little younger than both of us. Like, do you see the productivity cult? Is it outside of the purview of these curmudgeons?
No, I mean, I feel like I've grown up in this productivity cult. Like in high school, it was all about, okay, how many clubs can you be in, and how can you build your resume to be the most kind of available to get college scholarships and get into the best schools. And now it's, okay, I've even seen it run to like a social kind of standpoint of like, how many different friends can you meet up with in a week, and how many different times can you go out and do these social kind of events, not to mention like, okay, how hard are you working at your job? It's kind of a constant, are you doing enough to kind of gain worth for yourself?
Yeah.
Are you doing enough?
Yeah.
Be honest.
Be honest. No. I don't know. Probably not.
She is up. You are up at 6 o'clock. So
yeah, and you're chipper.
You get your gold star for today.
Yay.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, 2 gold stars. What do you say?
2 gold stars.
I wish we had little gold mockingbird stickers. You could just
put a bird on it, Scott. Put a
bird on it. Put a bird. Yeah, I love Tim Ferriss's podcast, and he's become a really fun and interesting interviewer. He was on Jamie Foxx's radio show the other day, and Jamie Foxx was like, "What if I told you Oprah was a white man? You're the Oprah of the internet." And he does. I mean, he started with a lot of life hack stuff, right? He was one of the first guys that really was popularizing that, and now has turned into this interview. He got kind of burned out in writing, and now he just interviews high performers like Seth Rogen, Arnold Schwarzenegger, a hospice doctor that analyzes death. So, I mean, I find that really interesting, especially someone who does more and more interviews. But Seth Rogen, who's one of the great entrepreneurs, said, Tim, I think you started with this life hacking thing, and now are you saying to people now that you have more power and flexibility, or what? Because everybody has some degree of power in their life. What do you do with it? Is that where we're going? And Tim Ferriss said, yeah, kind of, but I haven't really gotten that out of his show much. So that's one of the things that is so interesting about it is productivity stuff is a great servant, lousy master.
Yeah.
And I feel like somehow, and again, this is a podcast I love, so I can't say enough good about it, but there is something that rings hollow when we're just talking about productivity for productivity's sake, or the cult of excellence.
Yeah, I mean, when you do that 4-hour work week stuff, and I've actually, this is one of those rare books I've read, because the diet I'm following, for example, is all Tim Ferriss stuff. But I don't think people actually want to work 4 hours a week. I think they want to work a lot more than that. I think if you have 36 hours of free time, I think that's terrifying to people in our current climate. It's terrifying to me. So that's it. You can even put aside the sort of why are you optimizing yourself so much, but even once you have, it's sort of unquestioned that you need to, but then once you have, it's well, what then? Well, I'm creating all this other time so I can work out and ponder the mysteries of the universe. I mean, I don't think that is what people actually want. I think we want to be distracted from ourselves. As Nietzsche says, the man is in flight from himself. I think that's true.
He also says the most important thing one can develop in themselves is a sense of style.
Well, that I think the three of us are clearly cases in point.
Disciples of him, even if unwittingly. So, all right, let's stop the podcast. Just work out and Zen. No, just kidding. Let's press on to Malcolm Gladwell's podcast. This is from The Guardian, right, David?
Yeah. The Guardian reported on Gladwell's got a new podcast that he's just started, and they talk about it's called Revisionist History. And the first episode is it's where he does his Gladwell thing, basically. He's Malcolm Gladwell on the radio, and kind of getting people to look with fresh eyes at things that they've always known about. But I mean, you're the one who told me about this, Scott. Tell us about that first episode.
Oh, David, you flatter me. Go on. Yeah, so basically, it is really cool because it's like an audio book. It's like a sort of NPR narrative production, but with some essay kind of qualities. It's brilliant. And the first episode, it's called The Lady Vanishes, and he's in St. James Palace, and he's talking to this really eccentric art expert about this paying the roll call, which is like British soldiers in the Crimean War. And it's really, it took England by storm. He said people just like flocked to see it. And the Queen of England wound up buying it and displaying it in the palace. And he says, the only contemporary thing I think is like people camped out for Beyonce. I mean, this was the main form of media back then, like without, other forms of media outlets. But he was saying that this unknown female artist, Elizabeth Thompson Butler, made this breakthrough in exclusively male world. I mean, the Royal Academy of Art, which controlled the art scene, was all male. And then next year, she did another painting, which was the British military helped her stage it. She became so prominent, and they had to admit it into the academy, but they put it like in the worst place. And then they decided we can't have women admitted to the academy because at the reception, men are always escorted in by a lady, and what would a woman do? So it's sort of like people said, can Elizabeth Warren be Hillary's running mate? Well, I mean, you can't put two people same gender on the ticket. That never happens. But so basically he talks about this concept of moral leniency, how like he uses other examples, how basically in Nazi Germany they could love this Jewish poet Berthold Auerbach and then do all these horrible things to the Jews because, we love this poet though. Or after the Australian Prime Minister after Julia Gillard was won in Australia, misogyny went up and then all these awful comments were made. So it's sort of like the idea that, he's poking at the idea, if you do good, if you want to be good, do good. Actually, oftentimes the concept of moral license is after you make a decision that people see as virtuous, you'll actually oftentimes are tempted to actually be a worse person because, look, I did this virtuous thing.
It's so true. You can't help but think about preachers or those who are in church work who have spent Sunday morning doing something, at its best, which is very beautiful and gracious and full of love, and then Sunday afternoon you're getting into being extremely impatient with their children or with their spouse, or it's moral licensing. That is doing good a way to be good, or is it? I think. What does he say? I love this question here. When does doing good lead to doing bad, and when does doing good lead to doing more good? I mean, the truth is, a lot of times our good acts, you're into very Lutheran territory here, I think, but that's that just simply allows our self-justification to work faster. It gives us something to latch on to, and then our self-centeredness can kind of take center stage. It's a really convenient and unfortunate. So.
Yeah, I feel like so often we change our profile pictures to be in solidarity with something that happens in the world, but then choose to do nothing about it. And we are justified in that because oh no, look at this thing that I did publicly. Or we do so many things in like social media forums on Twitter, or like we gave them a retweet, so we're okay to do whatever we want now. And yeah, I feel like that's almost, I wonder if like social media has just kind of perpetuated this moral licensing kind of thing.
Yeah. I think you're totally onto something, because I can't help but think about all these think pieces about political correctness, some of which we've published, where you have people on social media and as you say, just making sure that they're aligned with the justice and brave displays of social virtue, and they're signifying constantly, or signaling. I think that's the word. You're signaling all the time that you are this kind of person in that kind of way, and it actually it gives you the justification or the excuse to then turn around and be extremely oppressive towards anyone that disagrees with you. And that we see this all the time because you're so convinced that you're doing the right thing, or that you're just, on the side of the angels, that then you turn around to those, and you act in the same exact way that you're accusing them of acting. It's moral licensing. I see it everywhere. I think it sounds like a brilliant first episode of that podcast.
Like, I made you coffee this morning. You're staying at my house, and I'm going to be a jerk to everyone else for the rest of the day. Because it's funny because in 30 seconds, if you think about the broad outline of moral philosophy, like there's a couple different ways to think about morality. One is kind of consequences, right? Like I act so that the most good happens for the most people or the least harm. Another is kind of commitments. Like I act, Immanuel Kant, sort of, the universal law that, I should do this thing no matter where it is. I could legislate in the universe. And then the last one is sort of like character. Like morality is about the kind of person and story you're living, which you see it in Aristotle. You kind of even see it in Nietzsche. So the character people, here's a little bit of empirical evidence, which in psychological studies, Gladwell cites, it looks like character ethics work in the inverse of the way they're intended, at least a lot of the time.
Huh.
So moving on to moral philosophy and Malcolm Gladwell, on to a beautiful piece that comes to us from where's this from, David?
This is from Ask Polly. This is our now friend, I might even venture to say.
You just interviewed her?
Fond colleague, Heather Havrilesky, writing for New York Magazine. She writes the advice column, Ask Polly. I was fortunate enough to chat with her on the phone last week. It was quite a milestone in my own life because I've ripped her off for pretty much, I'd say, 40% of the articles I'm most proud of on Mockingbird.
Were you like nervous? It was like a fanboy moment?
Yeah, there's a recording of it and someone was transcribing it in our office and I just had to leave the room because it was, you could hear so much like basically blushing in my voice and I'm not like that, Scott. Leslie, I'm a strong, stoic, masculine type.
There's the smell of masculinity here, just the power of it. Leslie, our listeners, if you were in here, I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's really something else.
Yeah, you imagine it was like the smell of like Gladiator, Are you not entertained?
So anyway, she's writing to a woman who titles herself Trainwreck, and the chief problem is, why am I always too much for men? And she describes a parade of relationships where she has sort of overwhelmed the man in question, and just they've needed to kind of leave the room after a while, and they've made it an excuse perhaps, but maybe her personality, her needs, it's just too much. There's an excess. And but Heather senses that she's fishing for something and then really lays it on in her classic fashion. She says, you're asking questions about yourself that sound wide open, but they're designed to be answered one way and one way only, with the following. Of course, you're not really that bad. You aren't broken. He's a jerk. He wasn't good enough for you. No one in his right mind would get tired of you or reject you. He is the one who is broken. Then Heather writes, I want you to brace yourself because this is going to be hard to hear. You are not bad, but you are broken. I'm broken too. Almost everyone is broken in one way or another. Broken people still thrive and love and do great things, but in the years before they realize they are broken, they behave in ways that are out of sync with the world around them. They make odd or arbitrary seeming choices in order to manage their needs and expectations, or they power down their emotions completely, or they drink too much, or they create fantasy worlds and they get angry at anyone who won't adhere to those fantasies. And that's kind of the diagnosis she goes on to go in. It's interesting that she's afraid of the word, or she backs off the word bad, which has got a value judgment, of course, and embraces the word broken. And I think you hear this a lot in Christian circles, actually, where we'll talk about, instead of talking about being sinners, we're talking about we're just broken people. And sometimes that drives me actually nuts because it seems to deny any and all culpability. And but of course I know what Heather's doing here is what she always does, and that she's empathizing in a kind of a gigantic fashion. She's working herself up into this frenzy of empathy in order to convey compassion to this person who's self-deluded and just has walled off reality, as she would say it. And so Heather, in the piece and in most of her work, it seems like that she's trying to convey that sense of love to another person. And the chief irony or trick is that it doesn't come through blanket affirmation. It comes through the admission of or vulnerability, admission of weakness, and that love and really healing begins not with a denial of how hard life is and how difficult you are, but in some kind of statement, confession, or acceptance of that fact. And you see this over in her new book, How to Be a Person in the World, which comes out in a couple of weeks. It's really
Gosh,
remarkable.
what was that my whole life?
How to be a person in the
Instruction
world.
manual for life.
Yeah, she kind of talks about like when you're broken, but you'll try new things, you'll hear echoes of your brokenness and that you'll feel wobbly, but you just accept it. And it was such a beautiful article to read because I feel like I've been in that spot where I've kind of allowed, I've asked those questions wanting that affirmation, but in my life, I've had those people who have been able to speak those really hard truths and be like, oh no, you want to hear this, but you need to hear this. And I feel like most of even like my generation, especially, what I've come to notice is we think that empathy just equals someone who's willing to like hold you and like comfort you when you're crying and all of those things, like be that shoulder to cry on. But empathy, I think really, as this article has like pointed out, like it's more than just someone who's going to comfort you when you're having a bad day. It's someone who's going to tell you you need to get up and continue to move on and just recognize like, okay, shake it off, recognize the facts, and let's move on from there.
Yeah, it's interesting because the whole dating game, right, is you try to make yourself likable by putting forth your best self, sometimes a slightly fraudulent self, so that you can convince somebody or feel that they unconditionally love you, so you can let out your true self. So it seems like almost to work at counterintuitively or at odds against what the means seem to work against the ends. But
it's a conditional thing that
you're using conditional stuff to get unconditional.
Yeah.
But Liel and I were talking, I told him our conversation, which our listeners heard, so I'm being repetitive, but that I have one wedding sermon kind of from several different texts, but my favorite version of it is Genesis 29, where Jacob, he thinks he's getting Rachel, the love at first sight woman. He wakes up and it's his uncle Laban cons him and he winds up with Leah, the ugly sister or the least sister, that was was not the object of his desire. But instead of like putting her away, he makes space for her. And virtually all of the prophets, priests, and kings, at least the powerful redemptive ones, most of them come from Leah's womb, not Rachel's. And
Jesus himself, right?
Jesus comes from Leah's womb. So like it's I think when we make room for the Leah, that grace is born in the womb of relationships. Or as Liel said about Leonard Cohen's broken hallelujah, it's in the broken places, the cracks, that the light comes in. Yeah, it's a beautiful piece. I would encourage all of our listeners to take a look at it. It's in Another Week Ends. And so does this one. Thank you all for being with me yet again. Leslie, thank you especially for getting up and spending your early morning.
Thank you, Leslie.
With David and I.
It's an honor, gentlemen.
And thank you, Scott.
The honor is all ours. Thanks for listening to the Mockingcast. As always, you can find all the content we reference on our website, mbird.com. And if you like what you heard, please drop over to iTunes, give us a rating and a review, preferably a favorable one. Or share it on social media or pass it on to a friend. We exist because of the enthusiasm, support, and generosity of you, our listeners and readers. So please, if you really like what's going on, consider partnering with us financially. Your generosity makes what we do possible. Thanks again for listening and have a great weekend.